Hello, welcome to the Manasplained podcast. I'm Connor. Today I'll be talking about the deck I built for Lady Evangela. So, if you remember a while ago, the second video I made was Angus Mackenzie. This is a worse version of that. So instead of Bant, it's Esper, so you swap out green for black. And instead of negating all combat damage that would be dealt this turn, you negate the combat damage dealt by a singular creature. I don't get it. It's so bad. Now, this hoses Voltron, unless they have hexproof. Yeah, this is just such a worse version of Angus Mackenzie. It's kind of insane. It does cost 1 less mana, only requiring 2. But at the same time, it's just so bad. So in order to facilitate this, I put in cards that would actually negate combat damage. A lot of the black and white fog effects. There is actually one black fog effect, funny enough. Also, I put in the propaganda-like effects because maybe that will disincentivize people to attack, because then you can, even if they decide to attack with 2 creatures and pay for that, you could still negate one of them, so that's pretty good. And then I decided to go a similar strategy to the Angus Mackenzie deck with a lot of planeswalkers and a couple alternate win conditions. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Let's jump into the video. So for the deck breakdown, I'm running 22 theme cards, which are all the planeswalkers, 5 Subtheme, 3 Synergy, 4 Protection, 8 non-bat cards, and the 2 win the game cards. Non-bat is obviously the no combat stuff, like Propaganda, Ghostly Prison, Ethereal Haze, stuff like that. And then I'll get into the Subtheme Synergy Protection later. As well, to round out the deck, we have 12 draw, 11 ramp, 11 removal, 5 board wipes, and 39 lands. One of the lands, not a real land, Maze of Ith, so that's why the number is 39, not 38 or 40. I like to have even land counts because it just looks nice. But you can't really count Maze of Ith as a land because it can't produce mana. And then the 5 board wipes, that's a lot, but because it's so planeswalker focused, all the board wipes get rid of creatures. And so because of that, you don't have to worry about cleaning up your planeswalkers when you do that. And you'll be able to get really good control of the board by drawing cards with your planeswalkers, picking off the stuff that they play after a board wipe with your planeswalkers, stuff like that. So yeah, this deck is very resilient in that aspect. So all in all, that leaves 19 crossover cards. This deck's cheating a little bit when I say that, because a lot of the crossover cards are planeswalkers. Planeswalkers do have multiple effects. They can draw cards, they can be removal, they can do this, that, the other thing. So they do fit into crossover categories very well because of that, which leads to high crossover counts like this. It doesn't feel like it's cheating nearly as much as a tribal deck, because with a tribal deck, the theme will be the tribe. So if you're doing an elf deck and you have a Reclamation Sage, I think a Reclamation Sage is elf, that might be a human, but whatever. Say you're doing, an elf deck and you have a Land of War Elves in there. That is a theme card and then also a ramp card. So because of that, those cards kind of inflate the crossover number. But for a deck like this, Planeswalkers, one of the reasons they are so strong is because of that modality. Because they have a +1 or a +2 that does something, and then a -2, 3, 1, +0 maybe, that also is usually somewhat effective or pretty effective because it's a minus ability. So yeah, that leads to Planeswalker decks having a high crossover count, which is a good thing because when you draw a Planeswalker, if they draw you cards, they can draw you into more Planeswalkers' other cards, and then when they're high enough, you could use their minus ability to get rid of something, or maybe you get an alt off. Like, Planeswalkers are so busted, and especially when you can have a lot of no combat effects, a lot of board wipe-like stuff to be able to keep the board clean so you can keep upticking them and downticking them without them getting removed. Your Planeswalkers are going to give you so much value over the course of a game. So I'll go over what all those Planeswalkers are now. So the Planeswalkers in this category are in no particular order, but we'll start with Aminatou, Vronos, and Kaya. Vronos is insane. It's phenomenal protection for your Planeswalkers. Up to 2 of them phase out, which means they cannot be attacked on your opponent's turn, so just 2 less targets, which is kind of ridiculous. Aminatou can bounce one of your Planeswalkers, which will reset its loyalty, and you could use it twice in a turn. So you cast some Planeswalker that draws you cards, or say removes a creature, you could play it, minus it to destroy a creature, and then bounce it with Aminatou to minus it to destroy another creature. That is also insane. And then Kaya, Ghost Assassin, can bounce your creatures, so it can bounce, like if you have any enter the battlefield effects on some creatures, or you want to bounce Kaya herself after you've minused her a few times to reset her loyalty, you can do that as well. These cards are great. They're so good. And Kaya's minus her 0 ability returns it at the beginning of your next upkeep. So if you need a creature that is really good, but you're worried it might be removed or something by sorcery speed stuff, you can get rid of that or get rid of her. I wish Kaya could target another one of your planeswalkers, but that might be a little too strong. Next planeswalkers I'm going to talk about, Dovin, Elminster, and Mordenkainen. They're all draw, but they also have slightly other effects besides that. So Dovin will gain you some life. You also tap some creatures with them, but you're probably not going to do that. And then Dovin's -9 is really mean. I have Dovin in another deck of mine, but I've never got the -9 off, because anytime I've thought about doing the -9 in a commander game, shutting off one person just didn't seem as good as gaining some life and drawing the card at that moment. Maybe later on, if someone's really going off and has like a giant board and you're worried about them, you could do that. But at the same time, depending on what you're looking like right now, the card draw is still always just great. Mordenkainen draws you 2 cards, and then you put one of them back on the bottom of your library, which is phenomenal. He can also make some creature tokens that are the power and toughness to twice the number of cards in your hand, which is ridiculous. And then his -10 is absolutely insane. You have to be able to close out the game, because unless you have like a pretty big hand, his -10 will probably just kill you in a couple turns, so you'd have to be careful about that. And the elements are super interesting. His +2 is just draw a card and then scries. Scrying after drawing the card is a little bit worse, but what his other static ability does, it makes your instant sorceries cost less. The next one costs less based on how many cards you've scryed. And holy crap, that's so good. If you had something like a Dismantling Wave, you have Elminster out and you +1 him, that Dismantling Wave now costs 1 mana. Like, that's insane. Elminster can also flood, is a army in a can. If you have a big instant or sorcery or any kind of cards on the top of your library that has a high mana value, you can just dump a bunch of 1/1 with 1/1s with flying onto the board to protect your board. So he's an army in a can, he's a cost reducer, he draws cards, he's phenomenal. So the next group of planeswalkers, they all care about your opponent's stuff. Ashiok, Nightmare Muse, and Tasha the Witch Queen both care about exiling your opponent's things and then potentially getting them back later. Ashiok, Nightmare Muse's ultimate is what would get those exiled things back later, while Tasha the Witch Queen's -3 cares about getting those cards that you exile back, getting to cast them, which is very good. Exiling your opponent's cards and then getting to cast them is so strong, because you're not down on card advantage. Like, when you cast cards from your hand, they get removed from your hand. But if you can exile your opponent's cards and then cast them, your hand size stays the same, you get to hold on to your removal, and you could use some of your opponent's removal against them. Ashiok Nightmare Muse as well makes bodies as a +1 that whenever they attack or block, they exile the top 2 cards of each opponent's library, which is crazy. And 2/3 blockers are pretty substantial, and because you're making 1 every turn, you don't mind throwing them away to blocks. You're probably not going to be attacking with them. You're more than likely going to be using them to block your planeswalkers, which if your opponents decide to not attack your planeswalkers because you have these blockers, you can keep ticking them up. And even Ashiok's -3, just bouncing someone to someone's hands and then exiling a card from their hand, still super great. It's non-permanent removal, because unless they have 0 cards in hand, you're probably not going to exile the thing you bounced. But at the same time, whittling down hand size, slowing down their tempo, which is phenomenal. Then Ashiok Sculptor of Fears draws cards and then makes your opponents mill, and then you could potentially get creatures back from their graveyard later with her -5. All these cards are phenomenal. I think they're all amazing. And they're kind of mean though. That's one problem with Ashiok's and Tasha's. These cards are mean. These are some of the planeswalkers that are the more permanent removal. Ugin can destroy a permanent's 1 or more colors. The Wanderer can exile target creature power 4 or greater. Dakon can exile a creature. And Kaya can exile a creature. The exiling is insane, because your opponents are not going to be able to do anything, be able to get them back usually. There are some cards that pull out of exile, but there are not many, and people don't normally run them. Ugin also manifests the top card of your library, basically, and also makes your colorless stuff cost 2 less to cast. There are some artifacts in here that are colorless for the ramp section because we don't have green, so Ugin can make those cheaper, and then also makes bodies that whenever those bodies die, you get to basically draw the card. So it makes a body dies, you draw the card that it exiled, which is amazing. It's so good. And then Dakon, his loyalty is equal to the number of lands you control when he enters. So if you have 7 lands out, he enters as a 7 loyalty creature, which is ridiculous. And then this deck doesn't have a lot of super huge artifacts or creatures, But at the same time, if there is a really important creature, maybe you have the Deep Glow Skate in your graveyard, you could -6 him, bring back the Deep Glow Skate, and double all the counters on all of your planeswalkers, which is insane. And then Kaya, Bane of the Dead removes, or doesn't remove hexproof, but it makes it so that your opponent's stuff with hexproof can be targeted as though it has hexproof, which means that if someone puts hexproof on their commander, you could still exile it with a Kaya, which is absolutely ridiculous. These are some more planeswalkers. These ones also draw you cards, but they make you lose life whenever you draw those cards. Lolth doesn't have a plus ability, but that's because whenever a creature you control dies, you put a loyalty counter on her. But then her -3 can make some more blockers, and they have reach. They're menace and reach 2/1, so they're very good blockers, very good attackers, but you're probably going to be holding them back on defense more often than not. And I'm probably never going to -8 Lolth. It's probably just the plus whenever you need card draw, and then the -3 whenever you need bodies, which is absolutely phenomenal. Vraska also does the draw card -1 life, but also then proliferates, which puts another counter on all of your planeswalkers. Also, removal can turn a creature into a treasure, which is hilarious. You can turn someone's commander into a treasure, and then watch them be real sad as they have to sack it. Now, if they decide to use their commander and sack the treasure to help pay for the commander's commander tax, that is only commander taxing them by 1, but it's still getting rid of their commander. They'll have to recast it, waste some more mana, which is absolutely great. And then, but Vraska's -9, it puts 9 poison counters, up to 9 poison counters on a player, which I will probably never be doing in this deck. I'd probably just rather the card draw, and taking one player out of the game with a Vraska like that kind of is a feel bad. And then Omnixilis, I've always loved this Omnixilis. It's +1, he's just draw a card, lose a life, it's great value. And then it's -3 is just destroy a creature. And then I have got its emblem off a few times, and whenever you get this emblem off, it destroys someone, because per rotation of the table, that's at least 8 life gone, which is 1/5 of their starting life total. And then if people are drawing more cards and more cards and more cards, it drains that person. So you can put this emblem on the archenemy, and then people just start plowing through cards, hopefully able to kill that person with the damage. Or you put it on the person that does draw a ton of cards, and then they'll accidentally kill themselves by drawing way too many cards. So yeah, I really like Omnixilis, and I think he's a really good planeswalker. Even if it's just for the card draw and the creature destruction, this guy's great. The next planeswalkers up are the 3 Teferis in the deck. Teferi, Master of Time, is an all-star. I've played him in a couple of decks, and the card draw Teferi gives you access to is insane. I have a cycling deck where I run Teferi's Ageless Insight, I run Rael the Everwise, I run Alheimer's Archive, all those cards like that. And when you can turn Teferi's +1 into draw 2 cards, discard a card, it's insane. Because you can do it on every player's turn, it just goes off, and you become kind of unstoppable. I've never minused Teferi, even if I had the 10, because I just don't like taking extra turns in that way, and I just enjoy drawing the cards way too much. And then Teferi Temporal Pilgrim, whenever you draw a card, put a loyalty counter on it, which is absolutely ridiculous. It's 0 is just draw a card, which essentially turns into a +1 that way. But it also can make some 2/2 creatures that whenever you draw a card, they get a +1/+1 counter, which those will get so big so fast. And they also have Vigilance, so you can attack and block with them, which is absolutely amazing. And then the ultimate, I'll never ult with this Teferi. I'll just be making blockers that also can be huge attackers and drawing cards, which is going to be absolutely insane. And then Teferi Temporal Archmage can untap 4 target permanents, which is probably what I'm going to be doing mostly with this Teferi, because the amount that ramps you is insane. If you have like Guildless Commons out, and then you minus Teferi, you're, instead of getting like 4 mana back, you're getting 5, maybe 6. You have something else that taps for more than 1 mana. Yeah, Teferi is absolutely insane, and I think he's like so good. And then the ultimate as well. Holy crap, the ultimate is so good. It's Teferi Master of Time static ability. Like that, if you can get that off, no one can touch you. Like, not even a little bit. You will if you can get Teferi Temporal Archmage's ultimate off, you will win the game, and I don't even think it'll be close at that point. Just being able to activate that many Planeswalker abilities over and over and over and over, it will be an insurmountable mountain of value. And then the last couple planeswalkers, Kasmina is some more protection for your planeswalkers, because it makes your planeswalkers and creatures spells that target them cost 2 more to cast, so your opponent's removal gets a bit more expensive. Elspeth, Sun's Champion, is just a great board wipe. Also, it's her +1, makes 3 1/1 white soldier creature tokens, which is absolutely insane. And then Spark Double can copy any of your planeswalkers. And Spark Double is a ridiculously good card. You can also copy your commander, but you're more than likely going to be copying another planeswalker, so you can use its broken abilities. Because, man, even if you just copy like a Kasmina or just the Op Nicholas from earlier and being able to draw more cards, that is so worth it. So the sub-theme of the deck is more proliferation-like effects. Proliferation is insane with planeswalkers because it acts like a +1 for all of them whenever you're able to pop that off. And yeah, I'm really happy with some of the cards here. I think they're really useful. So these are both 2-mana 1/1s that whenever they deal combat damage, they proliferate. Throwing Bird has to hit a player, but Grateful Apparition can hit a player or a planeswalker. But yeah, that's insane. The amount, because like it's a 1/1 flyer. In a game of Commander, not everyone's going to have flying or reach blockers out. It's not going to happen. So you're basically guaranteed to land an attack with either of these cards, basically every turn. And if you're not, that is a weird table that I've never seen before. And then the last couple cards in the proliferation category, Flux Channeler, which whenever you cast a non-creature spell, proliferate, which means whenever you cast a planeswalker spell, you proliferate, which is very good. Deep Glow Skate, there are some ways to bounce Deep Glow Skate, like with Aminatu and one of the Kayas, and when it enters, just doubling all of the loyalty counters on all of your planeswalkers is absolutely ridiculous. And the Vraska's Betrayal Sting, it's 0, or her 0 lets you draw a card and then lose a life and then proliferate, which is great. Like, that's so amazing. Putting all those counters on all your planeswalkers, again, it's so useful. And then the synergy cards are probably what you'd expect in a planeswalker deck. One of them I had not seen until I was making the Angus Mackenzie deck, and honestly, the card is absolutely insane. Yeah, Oath of Teferi is ridiculous. It lets you blink a planeswalker or creature. It's actually target permanent, so you could bounce any of your permanents, but you're probably going to bounce either a planeswalker to reset its loyalty abilities or bounce a creature like Deep Glow Skate in order to get its ETB effect again. But Oath of Teferi lets you activate the loyalty abilities of planeswalkers twice during each turn, which is insane. If you have the Teferi Master of Time, you have to activate that Teferi twice per turn, which is +8 on one rotation of the table. Just absolutely insane. And then Rings of Brighthearth, whenever you activate ability, if it isn't a mana ability, you may pay 2. So all your planeswalkers, you can pay 2 to double them, which is like so insane. I remember way back in the day, Rings of Brighthearth used to be so expensive because of this. But it has been reprinted a couple times, and it's honestly only gotten better over time because of all the other planeswalkers they've added. But yeah, Rings of Brighthearth, absolutely ridiculous. And then the Chain Veil, you can pay 4 and tap it, and then you can activate the loyalty abilities of all your planeswalkers an additional time. You do get hit for 2 damage if you did not activate the loyalty ability of a planeswalker this turn, which is very funny. But the Chain Veil for 4 mana being able to give you that ability is crazy. I don't think I have it in the deck, so I don't think I can make enough mana. I might if I have one source that taps for 2 mana. But the Teferi that you can minus it to untap 4 permanents can combo with the Chain Veil insanely well. So that combo is ridiculous, and I'm pretty sure there's a way to go infinite in if you have Teferi as your commander. So for the protection, 2 of the protection cards are planeswalkers, but the other 2 aren't. One of which I found during the Cleric tribal deck I was making, and I was just kind of had an epiphany of like how this card could work in this deck. So Kai's Ghost Form, classic card, put it on commander, put it on a planeswalker, any creature, gives it a +1 gives it another chance at life. It's absolutely insane. For 1 black mana, every time basically every commander deck that I have access to black mana, I will run a Kai's Ghost Form just because of how efficient it is and how amazing it is. Like, oh my god, I love that card so much. And then 8.5 Tails can give your planeswalkers protection, which means they don't take damage, which is awesome. Because 8.5 Tails can give a permanent you control protection from white until the end of turn, and can turn a spell or a permanent white until the end of turn. So for 3 mana with 8.5 Tails, you can stop all damage that would be dealt to one of your planeswalkers from a single source. And then for 4 mana from 2 sources, for 5 mana from 3 sources. And that is so... And if someone has like a commander that has white in the color its colors, and they're trying to attack your planeswalkers with it, you can just pay 2 mana, and now it just the planeswalker that they decide to attack just gets protection from it. It's so good. And also like removal. Someone's playing like a Generous Gift or a Stroke of Midnight. You can 8.5 tails, give your planeswalkers protection from that as well. It's so good. It is kind of mana expensive, costing 1 and a white per instance of it, but still, if you have the mana flow open, you could just do that, and now your planeswalker's completely safe. So I'm excited for the non-bat category, because when you're building a Bant deck, pretty sure that's white, blue, green, you have a lot of access to a lot of non-combat stuff. Most of the fogs are in white and green colors, but black does have a fog, which is kind of funny. So the black fog effect is darkness. It's from the original, it's from a Legends way back in the day. I think it was like 1994 that set came out, same set as this commander, and it says the same thing as Holy Day or Cameo False Hope, just prevent all combat damage to be dealt this turn, which is great. It's just 1 mana, prevent the combat damage, perfect. But also, this deck I'm running Ethereal Haze and Festival. Ethereal Haze prevents all damage that would be dealt by creatures this turn, which is insane. That's amazing. It stops some infinite combos if someone's like pinging people down or something like that. It stops anything like that. And then Festival, just during someone's upkeep, you can cast this, and then they lose a combat step. Like, they cannot declare attacks this turn if you play a Festival during their upkeep. That's crazy. I can't believe I didn't know about this card when I was building Angus, but I would definitely throw that in there because that's also really strong. And if you're preventing combat damage, they could still get attack triggers off. But this just stops them from attacking at all, which is awesome. And then lastly, we have the Ghostly Prison, Propaganda, and Silent Arbiter. So Silent Arbiter probably one of the strongest cards in the deck, because if you have Silent Arbiter out, only 1 creature can attack each combat. And then only 1 creature can block each combat, which is fine. But the point is that only 1 creature can attack each combat, so if someone's going to attack you, they can only attack with the 1 creature, and then you can use your commander to negate the combat damage from that creature. So Silent Arbiter combos with this commander amazingly. I think Angus Mackenzie is just a better card overall, because you don't need this combo. It just gets to negate the combat damage being dealt that turn. But I feel like Silent Arbiter here is absolutely amazing. And then obviously Ghostly Prison and Propaganda, 2 phenomenal Pillow Fort effects. So for the win condition, the win conditions are pretty bog standard for these colors, and with a Pillow Fort effect theme, and with all the proliferation, they are also a lot better in that regard as well. So the 2 win cons in this deck are Azor's Elecutors and Darksteel Reactor. Azor's Elecutors, whenever a source deals damage to you, you have to remove a counter from it. But at the beginning of your upkeep, you put a counter on it. And then if you have 5 more counters on it, you win the game. So Azor's Elecutors, with any kind of proliferation effect, is ridiculous. And then Darksteel Reactor also gets charged counters. It has Indestructible, and the counters can't get removed from combat or anything like that, but you need to get to 20 to win. So Darksteel Reactor just has this like inevitability factor to it, unless someone can exile it, which Exile Artifact is not that uncommon, but it's definitely a lot less common than like an exiling or destroying a creature. So Azor's Elecutors is really, really fragile in that way, while Darksteel Reactor really gives you that sense of inevitability. So because we're in blue, and this is a Planeswalker deck, we have tons of card draw. They're all Planeswalkers, so you've already seen them all, so I'll just run through them quickly, but this deck has so much card draw. So I've organized the Planeswalkers here by mana value and alphabetically. So Kaya, Teferi, Elminster, Lolth, all these cards draw cards, which is great. Kaya's is a minus though, so you do have to be worried about that, but it does make each of your opponents discard a card, which is phenomenal. The next group of them, Obnixilis and Vraska, make you lose life for drawing cards. Teferi, this Teferi gets loyalty counter every time you draw a card, which is insane. And then Tasha can exile instant sorceries from your opponent's graveyards, in addition to the drawing a card, which you can potentially then cast later, which is more insane, great value. And then finally we have Ashiok, Mordenkainen, Dovin, and Teferi. All of them, well, 3 of them draw cards, and then Teferi's is a little different. You look at the top 2 cards of your library, put 1 to your hand, and the other on the bottom of your library. So it's more card selection. It's a little worse than Mordenkainen because you have to choose between those 2 cards. But again, Teferi's -1 to be able to untap up to 4 target permanents is insanely powerful. So because we don't have green, the ramp is very artifact focused, and I kind of kept the ramp a little low to the ground so that you can get your commander out, and that way you can have your commander out, you can get your planeswalkers out, and then keep the ability up. So Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, again, some of the best ramp that you can get in colorless. Solemn and Wayfarer is some good land ramp. I have Solomon here, but I don't have a what's it called, Burnished Heart in here, because Burnished Heart has to sacrifice and you can bounce Solemn, and there's a couple bounce effects like that, so that's good. And then again, Teferi can untap your artifacts and lands. And then the other 6 ramp spells, I'm running all 3 signets and all 3 talismans for these colors. There is a little bit of life gain here and there, but I feel that running the talismans is really good here just for the color fixing. So because we're in Fs for colors, we have access to very, very good removal. I am not running some removal spells, which I'll get into, which you might be surprised not to see, but I'm very happy with the removal package. With a lot of it being planeswalkers, that is repeatable. So these are all the removal that aren't on planeswalkers. Path and Swords, again, exiling a creature, absolutely phenomenal. Damn, very interesting card. It's a 2-mana destroy target creature. It can't be regenerated. Or you can overload it and destroy and wrath the board, or damnation the board. It's such a cool card. I love the duality of it there, and the fact it goes from a 2-mana kill spell to a 4-mana board wipe is so efficient. It's honestly kind of ridiculous. Anguish of Making, exile a permanent, lose 3 life. The 3 life doesn't matter basically, because the permanent you're exiling probably is going to save you more than 3 life over the long run of the game. Dismantling Wave, being able to hit 3 artifacts or enchantments is absolutely crazy. And then Void Rend, being an uncounterable destroy target non-land permanent, is insane. And also because it says it can't be countered, it gets to get around Ward. Ward can't counter it. And then the planeswalkers that are also removal, I showed them earlier. Most of them just get rid of creatures. Most of them exile, while Obnixilis just destroys, and Ugin the Ineffable destroys target permanent that's 1 or more colors. So I'm running 5 board wipes, which does seem like a lot, but because this is such a planeswalker thematic deck, you're going to need to keep the board clear of potential creatures that could deal damage to them. So these are the 3 board wipes that are just, they're amazing. Niv's Disc, 4 mana, you just leave it out. It has the inevitability, unless someone blows it up before it comes back to your turn, then you just have a button. You have a wipe the board button for 1 mana that you just get to hold on to and threaten constantly. Nev's Disc is amazing. And then Austere Command can get all creatures. You can get some creatures, some artifacts, get some creatures, some enchantments, artifacts or enchantments. Like, yeah, you can, it's very modal, which is insanely good. And if you choose creatures with mana value 4 or greater, your commander will stick around because it costs 3, which is great. And then if your opponents have some better artifacts or enchantments than you can get those as well. And if you really need to, you can clear out all the creatures. Unfortunately, that'll also hit your commander, but you're probably wiping out a bunch of tokens that are going to be a problem. And then Farewell is just so insanely powerful. I still kind of can't believe that this is a card. And the last 2 board wipes you've seen before. Damn, again, I love this card. It's awesome. And then Elspeth Sun's Champion, one of the strongest planeswalkers I've ever seen. So I am running some pretty interesting and lands that you wouldn't see in most decks, or not all decks, because it's planeswalker focus, you run a couple lands that you wouldn't run most often, which I think is really interesting. So I'm running Karn's Bastion to proliferate on a land. It does cost 5 mana to proliferate, because you have to tap it itself in addition to paying the 4, which is perfectly fine. That's still on a land. If you need the mana sink because you have nothing else to do, you're probably not in a good state, but at least you'll have access to that. Nesting Grounds, you can tap it and pay 1, so essentially pay 2, to move a counter from one permanent to another permanent. So if you have one planeswalker that's 1 away from ulting, or they're on their ult but they would die, you could then use Nesting Grounds to move a counter onto them so they could ult or survive the ult, which is great. Interplanar Beacon lets you draw gain a life whenever you cast one of your planeswalkers, and also color fixes for said planeswalkers. And then Maze of Ith, of course, I'm going to run Maze of Ith. It functions basically just like the commander. It's essentially a second copy of the commander, and it's so good to help protect your board. And then I'll say it in this video, like I'll say in all my videos that have 2 or more colors in them. Wizards, can you please put the Battle Bond lands in the commander precons? Thank you. So I had a really difficult time making cuts for this deck, even just narrowing down the maybes list. I had the maybes list at like 30 cards that I wasn't just like, yep, they're gone. Like, I was still thinking about them. So I narrowed the maybes list down to around 10 cards to kind of show off all the different areas I was thinking about. because I didn't want to be talking about 40 cards in the maybe category. That seems a bit excessive. Batwing Broom represents all of the 2+ mana fog effects. I kind of only wanted the 1 mana fog effects because I'd just rather have access to casting more than one of those versus just casting one of these. And honestly, I needed to make cuts somewhere, and I was already running a lot of fog effects in addition to my commander, so that's fine. Baleful Strix, amazing blocker. You could bounce it to draw cards, but I just had better cards to add than it. Koskun Falls is the black version of a Propaganda or a Ghostly Prison, but it costs 4 mana, and during your upkeep, you have to tap an untapped creature you control, or you sacrifice it. So it's very inefficient, but it's very funny that there's a black Propaganda that sucks, or a black Ghostly Person that like sucks so bad, costs 1 extra mana, and has that like clause. If you don't have any creatures, this thing just gets sacrificed. It's so weird. Collective Restraint's really interesting. It has its domain before domain, so creatures can't attack you unless their controller pays X, where X is numbered different basic land types among lands you control. So yeah, Collective Restraint's very interesting card, and yeah, it is essentially domain. And then Sphinx of the Second Sun, it's such a good card, but because I'm running a Planeswalker deck, it doesn't double the Planeswalker's abilities. Yes, it would double my mana and give me extra draw and extra upkeep and all that stuff. It's just, the card is, it is an extra turn spell, and I don't know. I just didn't, if I was going to be running extra turn spells, this extra turn spell doesn't let my Planeswalkers activate a second time, so it just felt like it wasn't as good as other decks for that reason, but also at the same time, Sphinx is still insane. In the last 5 cards in the maybe category, Eldest Reborn, it's amazing removal, and it lets me return a Planeswalker from my graveyard to the battlefield. It's just, it does cost 5 mana. I'd rather just cast a Planeswalker, and also making my opponents discard a card and sack a creature feels a little mean, but Eldest Reborn is a ridiculously powerful card. Guildpact Informant is a 3 mana version of Thrumming Bird and Graceful Apparition, and I'd rather just run the 2 mana versions of it and not bother with that one. Rapid Hybridization, I'm not running Rapid Hybridization or Pongify or Beast or Generous Gift or Stroke of Midnight, because that would give my opponents creatures that they can attack me with, and I'd rather not have to waste my commander's ability on a 3/3 or a 1/1 or something like that. Kaya, Intangible Slayer, is a ridiculously powerful Planeswalker. I have it in my Oloro deck because holy crap, it is just so amazing. But it felt a little bit expensive and doesn't really do what I was trying to do. Also, it's 0, where I draw 2 cards. Each opponent may scry 1. I don't like giving my opponents that card advantage in that way. It just kind of feels bad. And then Ichor Moon Gauntlet can give my Planeswalkers the 0 Proliferate ability and an extra turn ability. And then if you cast an on-creature spell, you get to add an additional counter onto a permanent that already has that counter. It's insanely strong, but I'd rather be using the Planeswalker's abilities to either draw cards or remove things. I feel like if I had Ichor Moon Gauntlet out, I wouldn't be using the Proliferate ability as much, because I'm not really going for alts nearly as much. A lot of these Planeswalkers are in the deck for their sheer value, not the strength of their alts. So that's the deck. Let me know what you think. I'm really happy with it. As happy as I can be. I'm not a huge fan of the Esper colors. My favorite colors are white, red, and green. So running blue-black feels a little bad. And I feel like whenever you're running blue-black, when you're having white in addition to that, it always feels gross, because when you combo white with black or white with blue, you get some pretty degenerate cards. Orzhov and Dimir and, oh my god, Azorius. All 3 of those colors are just, oh, I hate them so much. And so when you end up having to, when you run those combinations of cards, you do some very good cards like Anguished Unmaking, which is an insanely valuable, super useful card. At the same time, I prefer other colors, and but that's why I'm doing this series. I'm doing this series so that I have to build in other colors that I normally wouldn't, because it helps me find cards that I wouldn't have before, or makes me build in ways I wouldn't have before, so that when I go to build my other decks, I'm a lot better at it, or I have a more knowledgeable card base that I'm going to be pulling from. And then these are my socials. Twitter is when I post when these videos go live. TikTok and Reddit, I'm probably going to start posting content there. I'll let you know if I do. I'm really trying to think about it, but I'm also like a little scrunched up for time right now, so maybe next week I might get to it, but who knows. And then Architect and Moxfield is where all these deck lists live. So thanks for watching, and as always, Get building splainers. Alright, that is so